Hi, my name is Jonathan Charles, and welcome to Examining Cisco SD WAN Deployment Options. And we're going to talk about where we deploy the Cisco SD WAN controllers, whether we want to install them in the public or a private cloud, or let Cisco manage the servers themselves. As well as how a managed service provider scenario, we can set up and use an enterprise certificate authority as opposed to using the built-in trusted certificates. Okay? We're going to start with deployment options, and then we'll go to the on-premise, then using a CA, and then placement challenges, and then the V-edges. Okay? So after we're done with this, you should be able to describe those flexible deployment options and the recommended method for consuming SD-WAN in the cloud. We're also going to describe it for the managed service provider as well. All right, so there's many options when it comes to deploying the controllers. You can deploy the 3 controller types, vManage, vSmart, and vBond, as required by your environment. Cisco offers a cloud service. This Cisco cloud is managed entirely by Cisco. The customers can then focus on setup and configuration of their own controllers. We also have a managed service provider can deploy the controllers in their own cloud, or an enterprise can install controllers in their own private cloud or their data center. Controllers, of course, must be IP reachable from the edge devices and from other controllers. The actual location is technically flexible as long as the controllers are hosted entirely in the cloud in the left column, which is the recommended model. Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services are directly supported and integrated into the solution. You can deploy in single or multiple availability zones. You can deploy controllers entirely on-premise, that right column over there. You can use public and private transport networks, but you must consider some specific design issues, which we'll talk about in the coming sections. And we can also do a mix of the two deployment models. It's important to point that the controllers can reach each other on an IP level, and that the via edge devices can reach the controllers, right? Because they're going to need to talk to each other regardless of where they are. If they're in the cloud, we're obviously going to have internet connections to the controllers. If they're on premises, we can have private connections to the cloud. So if you have an MPLS connection only for a site, and it cannot connect to the cloud-enabled controller, but we can connect to our data center, we can connect to the vSmart and vBond there. Okay? So deploying the Cisco SD-WAN controllers in the cloud requires the following steps. Okay? Basically, what you're going to do is in the Cisco Commerce Workspace, you create the customer and the overlay network are going to be created there. We're going to give them some IP prefixes of what we're going to be connecting to. Basically, we whitelist a couple of IP prefixes so that people are connecting to their controller. It's also required for the overlay setup, and the final bring up of the overlay requires some networking configuration. The controllers are going to check whether a connecting edge device belongs to the network. To allow us, the customer supplies a list of vEdge routers in the .viptela file format, which includes the serial number of the vEdge routers. The customer is going to have to supply this list in order to whitelist the vEdge routers that may join the overlay. Note that the Cisco SD-WAN solution has strong security based on devices authenticating through certificates. These certificates contain an organization ID which must match across the entire network and must be configured on your certificate authority. Therefore, all of the preceding steps must be coordinated to match the correct parameters, including that organization ID. vOrchestrator is going to facilitate that bring up of the SD-WAN controller infrastructure in the Amazon Web Services cloud. And it provides the entire workflow, including redundancy between controllers. Okay? The setup in the AWS cloud is within a single virtual private cloud with a single internet gateway. All external connectivity passes through the internet gateway. The controllers are deployed, each with one interface in the management subnet, VPN 512 as we discussed earlier, and one in the WAN subnet, VPN 0, and both subnets are going to default to the internet gateway. Okay? Access to the controllers is going to traverse that internet gateway, and each controller has 2 elastic IP addresses, one per interface. Elastic in this context means that the IP address belongs to the customer and stays with the customer, as opposed to static, which is not customer specific and can change over time. Access, of course, to the controllers is going to be whitelisted, such that only legitimate IP hosts can access the controllers. On the management interfaces, access is typically restricted to Secure Shell and HTTPS. On the WAN interfaces, access is restricted to the standard Viptela UDP ports, which we'll discuss later when we get into the details of the vEdge. And the whitelists are going to be managed through the vOrchestrator. Okay? The communication between the controllers is not always going to be within the same subnet. as you might expect, while vManage and vSmart communicate directly over the WAN interfaces, all communication with vBond from the vSmart and vManage within the virtual private cloud and outside the virtual private cloud use those elastic IP addresses we talked about on the last slide of the vBond. This way, traffic is always forced out of the virtual private cloud and through the elastic IP of the vBond back in. This is so that we can detect NAT private and public IP addressing, which vBond can detect and resolve correctly. We'll see later that you must configure an IP address of the vBond on every other controller in Edge node. Remember to always configure the same elastic IP of the vBond on all devices. Remember, all devices are going to come up and the very first thing they're going to do is connect to vBond. So vBond has to be reachable above all else, because vBond is going to tell them where they can get to all the other servers. Okay? We also support multi-tenancy. So managed service providers can deploy it in the following ways. Dedicated, each customer has their own dedicated set of controllers. Or multi-tenant. vManage and vBond are shared between tenants. Note the vSmart controllers must be dedicated to a specific tenant and can't be multi-tenant, mostly because they're going to control all the prefixes and make sure that that's distributed correctly. We don't want to mix those two together, it would cause chaos. When setting up vManage for the first time, you're going to have to decide whether to run it in multi-tenancy or single tenancy, and you can't change that after the fact. Okay? In summary, the cloud deployment is the recommended method for deploying the Cisco SD WAN solution. You can deploy Cisco SD WAN controllers on premise and locally manage them, but you must consider IP reachability, firewalling, and NAT. And MSPs can use multi-tenant modes of operation. And as always, the recommendation here, I mean, from an easeability, if you're just starting into this and you're relatively not giant, I would recommend letting Cisco manage those servers for you for the first time. And then you can migrate from that to a private or your own private cloud or your data center. Okay? Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next topic.